And at number 10, thermochemical energy. Let's start off this list by addressing the basics behind Sam's powers. He possesses the ability to generate something called thermochemical energy from his body, releasing it from his skin. This is energy that allows for the mutant to thrust himself and propel his body through the air, not dissimilar to a rocket. In the early days, he was only able to emit this energy from his feet and his legs, but nowadays his skills have improved tenfold, and he can release this energy from any part of his body, but we'll dive into more of that a bit later on. And at number 9, superhuman durability. This one is kind of a given when your mutant power is literally flinging yourself through the air at dangerously fast speeds. When using his powers, Sam's durability increases significantly, all thanks to the energy field that forms around his body. When not using his powers though, he's as vulnerable as a regular old human being. Despite what he's learned in his training, of course. I mean, that'd come in pretty nifty. Like, imagine you just wanted to show off to your friends and then you're just like, I'm gonna shoot myself into a wall and then break through it like the Kool-Aid Man and live to tell the tale. And at number 8, willpower. Shooting oneself through the air is no light matter. Is that a pun? I guess. If you think about it, it could be potentially fatal for Sam to do so, but that's where this facet of his powers come in. He is able to maneuver his body, control his speed, and change his direction solely through sheer willpower. This could potentially answer why our next number has been a question for those of you who are Cannonball fans. And at number 7, she's a skilled marksman. Aside from being well versed in hand-to-hand combat, Blink is a very skilled marksman, or markswoman actually, and has an almost unbelievable accuracy when throwing projectiles at her opponents. She's incredibly fast, she can move in the blink of an eye, and has an enhanced level of agility, although it has never been clear whether or not her agility and her accuracy were the result of pure mutation or just come from years of training. Moving on to number 6, black magic. On Earth 616, Blink briefly dabbled in black magic in an attempt to revive mutant Selene in Europe. Now, she was under the influence of Selene when this happened, who had magically possessed her in order to do so, but luckily was stopped. Emma Frost, along with Doctor Strange and others, would prevent Blink from going through with it, attacking her and subduing her. Blink of the 616 universe has some serious beef with Emma Frost from when she was a prisoner of the Phalanx and felt abandoned by Frost and the X-Men, and eventually just ended up teleporting away to another dimension after this conflict ensued. And at number 5, the In-Betweener. Jumping into a different alternate version of Clary's for this number, let's talk about What If Volume 2 Issue 75 from 1995. Titled, What If Blink of Generation X Had Not Died, the story follows exactly what its title states, with other young mutants of Generation X dying in Blink's place. She ends up finding herself in the realm of the In-Betweener, a cosmic entity, who she then seemingly kills in combat, gaining his powers. With these powers she can warp reality and she tries to improve the world, ending the human-mutant conflict. Except she also tries to save her Generation X teammates, but in doing so causes reality to crumble and disintegrate, since their deaths were the reason that she found herself with these new powers in the first place. Blink undoes all of the changes that she made, and the In-Betweener reveals that he was not dead at all, taking Blink under his wing as an apprentice to train her in using these reality warping abilities. Up next, number 4, translocation. Now, we'll be talking more about Blink's trans-spatial displacement abilities and her javelins a little bit later on, but for the sake of this number, context, Blink can create javelins that she uses to teleport others and objects. Now, aside from all the neat stuff that they can do, which like I said we'll be getting to shortly, she can also use these javelins as beacons, or rather warp beacons, which will lock onto an object or an individual and translocate them to a keyed position determined by Blink. Now you can imagine how useful a skill like this can be when determining tactical approaches for battle, or when needing to go stealth and quietly remove a foe from the nearby vicinity. Moving on to number 3, biokinetic blasts. One of the many tricks Cannonball has pulled over the years when utilizing his thermochemical energy field propulsion is that he can create biokinetic blasts out of his hands, like concussive blasts. It takes a lot of concentration to channel it, but it has proven to be an effective attack. In addition to this, he was trained in hand-to-hand combat by Cable and has become an efficient fighter that way. Moving on to number 2, energy absorption. Cannonball can absorb and redirect energies from others. In Uncanny X-Men issue 341 from 1997, he took on Gladiator, aka Kalark, the warrior from the Shi'ar Empire, the Shi'ar Imperial Guard leader, who gives off some serious Superman vibes, might I add. Gladiator is a pretty strong dude. When fighting him, Sam was able to absorb his punches and redirect their energy force to use as an attack. That's not the only thing that he can do when it comes to energy absorption though. He can absorb outside kinetic energy to add to his own energy supply, making our next number even more powerful. And at number 1, his blast field. Perhaps the coolest thing that Cannonball can do is that he can manifest his energy as an impenetrable and practically indestructible blast field. Not only does this act as a very specific force field of sorts that protects his body incredibly well, he can also do a whole lot of other neat stuff with it. He can extend the energy to encompass him like a personal shield, extend it far enough to protect others under that shield, and he can shape it in various ways. He's done so to imprison foes in the past. And when he absorbs outside kinetic energy, Sam has used it to increase the power of his own attacks and blows, and can even create explosive shockwaves upon impact. But it is important to note that anything he does with this blast field takes a lot of concentration. He's essentially emitting this energy and actively concentrating on not blasting off, so that he doesn't propel himself into the air when he uses it.
Number 10. Slowed aging. Despite being born in 1946 to his parents Logan and Wolverine's wife Itsu, Daken barely looks a day over 25. In reality, he is almost mid-70s, but he certainly doesn't look it. This seems like an obvious power in truth. I mean, Wolverine obviously is over 100 years old, so it shouldn't surprise us that his son is also almost ancient. However, we also all think of Daken as being Wolverine's son, and therefore just think of him as being like super young, like being the younger Wolverine. I actually forgot myself just how old he is when I was writing this list. So just because he looks and often acts quite young doesn't mean that he is. It is likely that his lifespan will echo that of his father, meaning that he'll likely live well beyond 100. Who's ready for the Old Man Daken series? I bet he'll still be as sassy and broody as he is now. Probably also still look 25. He'll just be like 25 with white hair. Number 9. Built-in Muramasa Blade. The Muramasa Blade is known for its exceptionally devastating properties. It can cancel out the regeneration or healing factor of those it comes into contact with, and is tough enough to cut through adamantium. Basically, it's the blade you want if you're going to fight with Wolverine. In Daken's case though, he wanted to use it in a fight against Romulus. He ended up getting a piece of the blade following a fight against Cyclops and the X-Men. Cyclops had been guarding the blade at the time. Once he had it in his possession, Daken took the blade to the Tinkerer with the purpose of having it melted down and attached to his claws. More specifically, his one wrist claw. Of course, this needed to be a delicate procedure, given that Daken himself could be harmed by the metal of the blade, because you know, he's also got a healing factor. As such, the Muramasa was not properly anchored to Daken's claws, because it was kind of a rush job, and because it's kind of a hard job to do. Meaning that when Wolverine came after Daken to stop him, it was easier for him to do so. Wolverine broke both of Daken's arms and was able to remove the built-in Muramasa blade from him. Daken also gets his arms broken a lot. Still, it was pretty insane for a few issues when Daken had the power of the Muramasa blade literally embedded in him, or rather sort of like on him. Number 8. Master Martial Artist. Daken was trained by Cyber, aka Silas Burr, who currently goes by the alias of Hornet. Burr trained Daken at the camp that he was placed in by Romulus after he'd been taken in by the villain following the accidental destruction of his adopted family by Daken's own hands. Long story. This boot camp located in Canada was the same one his father Wolverine had trained at. Daken was trained there for 9 months and was considered Burr's most promising student that he had ever trained. Daken was then ordered by Romulus to destroy the camp and kill everyone within it. He complied, but as he was about to finish the job and kill Burr, Romulus appeared and ordered Daken to spare Burr, whom he claimed he had plans for. It was this superior training that would later be key to Daken's abilities to defeat skilled hand-to-hand combatants later in life, like the Punisher, whom he successfully defeated with his claws and fighting skills, despite the fact that Frank Castle was actually armed at the time. Yeah, he had like a bunch of guns. The fight ended with Daken as the Dark Avengers Wolverine, decapitating and dismembering the Punisher.
In at number 7, his power levels vary. Over the years, Sam's powers have varied wildly. As we mentioned earlier, in the beginning, Sam was only capable of emitting thermochemical energy from his legs and feet. And while his ability to manipulate his blast fields are pretty consistent, more on those later, the full range of his powers have been speculated. At his peak, we've seen him plummet to the ground from a high altitude and completely devastate several city blocks. He's also faced foes that are considered quite strong in the Marvel Universe. One thing is for sure though, when he applies thrust to his powers, there is a significant hike in what he can do, like increase his strength enough to lift over a ton of weight. Up next, number 6, flight. Duh. Right? But Sam's ability to fly is one that has a history. Now in the early days, the character wasn't able to stop himself once he throttled himself into the sky and began to fly. Despite being able to maneuver in order to fully stop, he would have to find an object strong enough to force him to stop by holding onto it or like straight up crashing into it. Or he would keep flying until his powers ran out of energy, as if he were some sort of propeller plane puttering out of gas. But now, after years of practice, the character can stop himself without having to resort to those tactics. I guess practice does make perfect. Up next, number 5, he might be immortal. It has been speculated that Sam is a member of the Externals, an immortal mutant group not to be confused with the Eternals, the race that Thanos and Eros belong to. Context time. The Externals are a rare subspecies of mutants who are immortal, are capable of rebirth, and can absorb power post-mortem. It varies, and most of them were X-Men antagonists over the years. Each external represents an intangible concept, like despair, fortitude, wisdom, opportunity, patience, corruption, the list goes on. So why is Sam presumed to be an external? Because of his ability to come back to life after being killed, as seen in X-Force issue 9 from 1993. While his status as an external is not clear, and Cable has even stated his belief that Sam is not an external, despite stating in the past that he was before, his awakening was something that was felt by all of the other externals when it happened. It's also worth noting that he died twice over the years. And the intangible concept that he's associated with is hope, so And at 4, King of the Dwarves. Alright, this one is a bit obscure, but back in What If Volume 2 issue 12 from 1990, in a story titled What If the X-Men Stayed in Asgard, you know, the one in which Storm becomes the new goddess of thunder, Sam ends up staying too. And he falls in love with Kindra, the daughter of Eotree, the Dwarf King. You know, the fellow that Peter Dinklage played in the MCU in Avengers Infinity War. Eotree dies later on in a battle, and Sam ends up taking on the mantle of the King of the Dwarves, under the name of Sam the First. One can assume that the title comes with the perks Eotree had, which was an expertise on forging weapons and an extended lifespan, the latter likely being what Sam would have inherited. And to be fair, considering that when the X-Men were in Asgard, Cannibal pretty much saved Odin's life, so he definitely has earned the respect of the Asgardians enough to take up such a title.
Number 3. Mask his scent. Despite not being at an Omega level when it comes to his pheromone powers, Daken can actually use his pheromone powers to also hide himself when he wants to remain hidden. We all know how good of a tracker Wolverine is, and with Daken's senses heightened as well, he has also inherited his father's gift for tracking. But unlike his father, he can also mask his scent, making him an especially good hunter and tracker in the sense that he actually can't be tracked himself while he's tracking you. So it would be hard for anyone to know that Daken was actually on their trail, and it would be equally hard for someone to hunt him. Pheromones. They're more than just emotion manipulation. Fun fact. Number 2. Energy Claws. Energy Claws. While Daken was the Horseman of Death, he was granted some bonus powers from the Celestial Death Seed, which resurrected him. Oh yeah, before he was the Horseman of Death, he died. Better yet, it was Wolverine who killed him. Yeah, I think he drowned him in a puddle actually. I know, it's pretty surprising. A lot of family drama between those two. One of the powers the Death Seed granted Daken was Enhanced Claws. The best way to describe them is Energy Claws. They were imbued with some kind of dark, necrotic, or celestial energy, and his new Energy Claws appeared to be more durable and allow him to infect others with the energy that they emit. Weirder still, sometimes they still kind of show up. He sometimes still has Energy Claws. It's really random though. Number 1. Master Manipulator. Beyond being the king of sass and insanely skilled fighter and being armed with his claws, healing, and pheromone powers, Daken is also an evil genius. He's manipulated some of the best and even double-crossed those who thought they had his loyalty, proving that Daken is always out for himself, taking what he wants when he wants it with no apologies to anyone that he has to manipulate in order to get his way. Such a bad boy. Such a bad boy. He has manipulated Norman Osborn, outsmarted Reed Richards, and even used the Fantastic Four, Avengers, and X-Men in a play against one another. When it comes to devious plans, Daken proves time and time again in the comics why he's just simply one of the best. Also, you know, if you're like double crossing Norman Osborn, you're just like, I don't know, you're like a master manipulator. You don't mess with Norman Osborn. Unless you're Spider-Man. Number 10. Superior Sneak. Toad can often leap from place to place so quick that it makes it hard to track him, and easy for him to sneak up on you. But in the X-Men Evolution animated series, Toad shows off his ability to go undetected in a different way. X-Men Evolution was a TV show about the X-Men that imagined them all as teenagers who went to school together with Brotherhood of Evil Mutants youngsters as well, yet still had semi-secret mutant and superhero and supervillain identities. Toad manages to showcase his skills as a pickpocket, successfully stealing wallets from those attending the school's football game while he's under the bleachers. He is caught, but not by those he's stealing from, but by a few members of the team who walk past and see him stealing. So his prowess as a pickpocket remains confirmed, and fortunately he ends up saved by Scott Summers, who attempts to defuse the situation. Oh man, people on football teams always tend to be bullies, am I right? If there's anything I've learned from cartoons and cliques in high schools. Number 9. Alien Tech. In an effort to woo Scarlet Witch, Mortimer stole alien tech to use himself from the Stranger. He knew of the Stranger because he had previously been kidnapped by him. Impressively, Toad built his own spaceship to get there, and once on the planet succeeded in learning of and procuring the tech that he desired. He returned to Earth ready to win over Wanda, but learned that she had married Vision. Furious, he decided to attack the Avengers, impersonating the Stranger. Eventually, however, they won the day. Even armed with his tech and illusions, Toad was defeated, and found out as just being Toad and not the stranger. Poor Toad. This was also back in his jester days. Yeah, that's right, he was made to dress like a jester. Magneto's fool originally. Though this was around the time we saw Toad questioning the master he had been loyal to for so long. Which I love for him. I just love that growth of being like, fine, I'll do anything you say, to being like, I'm gonna question you. Number 8. Slime Bind. Toad can spit or secrete slime, depending on which version of him we're talking about. This slime acts as an adhesive or restraint. He's used it in the X-Men films before to silence and incapacitate someone by covering their face with it, and in the X-Men 90s cartoon we saw him use this slime and it means restraining his opponent. The slime dries quickly, so it's not something you'd want to get wrapped up in, unless you have the super strength to break free from it once it's dried. And of course, the tighter you're bound, the harder this would be. Number 7. Emotional manipulation. Daken has the ability to secrete pheromones which allow him to manipulate his opponent's emotions. He can make you feel depressed, happy, erratic, anxious, sad, or even calm you mid-fight. I wonder who that could be super useful against, calming one down. You guessed it, the Hulk, or more specifically in regards to my example here, the Hulk's son Scar. Daken used this technique on Scar mid-fight, causing the big green guy to sit down and talk with him and then change back into his human form. He almost kills Scar as a result, at Scar's own behest while in human form. Fortunately, Banner and Logan bust in and put a stop to this. Logan's like, I told you my son was wily, I told you. He's a troublemaker, that Daken. Number 6. Samurai. Wolverine was trained as a samurai, and though he and Daken are very different people, it appears this skill did not skip a generation when it comes to Daken. Not that it's like inherited, but you know what I mean. In Dark Wolverine issue 76, Norman Osborn questions Daken about his skills, asking him if he too was trained in the ways of a samurai, like his father. He answers that in fact he was, and that he also happens to be a skilled archer as well, adding that ability of marksman to his long list of capabilities when it comes to fighting. Because you know, samurai are also trained in archery. Fun fact, in case you didn't know that. Number 5. Telepathic resistance. You might have guessed this would be on the list. I mean, if you've seen a lot of my other superpower lists revolving around mutants, you definitely were probably expecting this one. But you still might be surprised because, you know, it's not what one imagines when they initially think of Daken's abilities. Daken's side defense abilities were so strong, as a matter of fact, that he was able to use them to rebound an attack on his mind from a young Jean Grey, throwing it right back at her, causing her to momentarily lose control of her abilities and attack her teammates. It's like a side blast outward at them. That's pretty cool though, if you can like use it against, even though it was a young Jean Grey at all, I feel like a side defense that's a strong side defense. In my mind. Number 4. Undetectable Strike. You might have noticed that Daken seems to have a remarkable skill when it comes to landing blows on his enemies before they even seem to notice him. While he is pretty fast when it comes to his reflexes and reaction time, it turns out that the speed behind his attack doesn't actually have to do with super speed. Nah. It's more of a learned technique. While fighting Deadpool in Wolverine Origins, he explains to Wade just exactly how this apparent superpower works. It isn't about being invisible or being super fast, it's actually about simply being where his opponent can't see, coming at your opponent from a vantage point which they themselves can't anticipate. It's a pretty cool superpower, because he definitely hits people when like they do not see it coming at all. He's also done it when he seems to be in someone's line of sight, so I don't know what that means. I guess he's like knows where your eyes are. Number 3. Super Breath. A lesser known ability is Toad's powerful breath. Because of his mutated lungs, he's able to take in enough air and exhale forcefully enough that he can produce a strong wind with his breath. He can then use this exhale to knock down his enemies. But how powerful can it be? Well, powerful enough to knock down the mighty Wolverine, who is also known for his strength and endurance. So strong enough, in my opinion. Unfortunately, this is a somewhat inconsistent ability, so don't expect to be seeing Toad use it left, right, and center. And to be fair, Toad is also known for his nasty smell. He doesn't often bathe due to the fact that it messes with his chemical balance, which only makes him smell even worse. If we can assume that he also doesn't brush his teeth very often for the same reason, then I'm sure his super breath would knock you down for more than one reason. It's not just the force, it might be the smell. Number 2. Fire Tongue. In the X-Men Blue series out of 2017, Toad seems to have developed a secondary mutation. Not only does he have his prehensile tongue, which is super strong, we actually see him choke Cyclops pretty hard here by the way, but we also get to see him with a flaming tongue. Yeah, I know, crazy right? This happens after mutants are forcefully expelled from the United States and moved to New Tian during the Hydra reign in the US under reality warped Hydra Captain America. Whether the secondary mutation was somehow brought upon by the move or not remains unknown. Still, pretty sick little green flames coming off of that tongue. I hope we get to see more of this ability in the newest relaunch of the X-Men. Number 1. Tech whiz. Beyond just the powers he has as a mutant, Toad often displays a superior aptitude when it comes to technology. Not only has he built his own devices, including a power suit and a spaceship, but he is also a master hacker. During the House of X series, we see just how powerful he is when it comes to his hacking skills when he is sent on a mission with fellow Brotherhood members by X to a facility where he can hack into a few of the smartest people in the world's computers without leaving a trace of himself behind in order to get information on the development of Nimrod tech and a potential mother mold. It takes him almost no time to finish the hack, and before he can even finish complaining at Mystique for rushing him, he has the job completed. So I'm not sure what's more frightening, but I feel like in the modern day, Toad armed with a laptop just might be more frightening than like his tongue grabbing you. I wonder if he could type with his tongue. Probably. Oh my goodness, he's probably a really fast typer.
Starting us off in at number 10, teleportation warps. Let's address the most obvious of Blink's powers. Not only can she teleport herself, but she can teleport others at will. And we're not just talking about one or two people if she concentrates hard enough. She's capable of teleporting sizable groups of people, and when it comes to objects or organic matter, very large masses. She once teleported a large cannon that weighed approximately 138,000 pounds. This power is referred to as warping teleportation, and Blink of the 616 universe has range effectively to the moon and back. It's also worth noting that teleporting large masses does not create any physical strain for her. Man, it's kind of like the dream. If you're like, I gotta move, let me teleport all my stuff from one place to the next, bam, done. Up next, number 9, she can open portals. Aside from teleporting, she can open up portals that lead to elsewhere. This means that she can displace projectiles coming her way by opening up a portal and sending them elsewhere. And it's not just attacks or objects that this affects, she can transport foes too. Technically speaking, these are biomolecular displacement warps that she creates by manipulating the electromagnetic fields of a particular area. These portals are generally pink in appearance and make a blink sound when activated, hence her codename. These portals remain intact until Blink uses her powers to shut them. Moving on to number 8, a little destructive. Another trick that Blink has exhibited over the years is one that's quite destructive. She can use her teleportation powers to teleport specific parts of an object. This means that if something along the lines of a gun, for example, was pointed in her direction, she could teleport part of that gun elsewhere, preventing the attack. On the flip side of that, she can also remove parts of an opponent. She has been known to attack a foe with her javelins, more on those later, and hit a specific part of their body, teleporting only that part of their body instead of their entire person. Yikes, imagine getting hit in the leg and then just like losing a leg forever because it's teleported to Spain. That would suck.
Number 7, super strong legs. As Toad has developed as a character, he was given his now famous prehensile tongue, and with his popularity growing, his fighting prowess was also increased to include better fighting skills, although he's never been formally trained. With fighting, Toad often utilizes his super strong legs in battle, using his super strong leg kick. Just like most toads and frogs are known for their super strong legs, so is Toad by his namesake. The crazy thing about his strength though is that it really only extends to his legs. It's a very specific type of super strength, making him still somewhat looked down upon when it comes to other supers who possess super strength, you know, throughout their entire body. Number 6, agility. Toad wasn't always very agile. In fact, when it came to hitting his mark originally in the comics, he more often missed it. But over time, as he grew and developed as a character, writers decided to give him a better chance in a fight by increasing his dexterity. In fact, after he was wounded and then healed by Mystique using the technology of Prosh, a sentient ship, he found himself stronger and more capable than he had been previously. It was believed in healing him this way, they had fixed the damage done to his powers when he was experimented on by Amanda Mueller, which we find out later was a thing that happened in his past. So it's kind of a retcon, but you know, some retcons are pretty good. Number 5, wall crawling. Spider-Man isn't the only Marvel character with this ability, or other spider totems for that matter. While many people attribute wall crawling to those spider folk alone, it turns out toad folk also boast of this too. Well, more specifically one toad folk, Mortimer. He's kind of the only toad folk we got right now. Remember the slime bind I was talking about earlier? Well, this power sort of goes hand in hand with that one. Not only can Mortimer spit slime and use it to restrain you, but he can also secrete slime from his hands and feet. This sticky substance is what allows him to climb walls and wall crawl easily, making him hard to chase and making it easy for him to sneak up on someone. Number 4, super strong tongue. One of those abilities that was also increased was the strength of his tongue. Not only does Mortimer have control of his tongue in the way that he can snatch things with it and use it to open doors, but his tongue was also given super strength. He could use his tongue to swing with, and he could use it to crush things akin to like a boa constrictor.
Moving on to number 3, her genetics. Details of Blink's ancestry revealed in the Apocalypse vs. Dracula miniseries shine some light on why Blink is the way she is. Now, according to that story, in the year 1897, Apocalypse's genetic descendants, known as the Clan of Akaba, had a member the name of Frederick Slade. Slade looks a whole lot like Blink. He had pink hair, green tinted eyes, and could teleport himself, along with others and objects with a blink effect. Slade was forced to sire a child with a woman named Miss Ferguson. Because of this, it is implied that Clarice is a descendant of Frederick Slade's and therefore is also a descendant of Apocalypse himself. Oh. She does not like Apocalypse, or at least her Age of Apocalypse version does not like Apocalypse, so gotta be a lot of hard feelings there. And at number 2, the Exiles. Now, it wouldn't feel right doing a list about Blink without discussing the Earth 295 Age of Apocalypse timeline Blink, the leader of the Exiles team. She's also very different than her 616 self. She's significantly more confident and determined and unafraid of her powers. The Exiles are a timeline hopping team initially employed by the Time Broker in order to fix broken realities. They would go on adventures all across the multiverse, including a slew of different hypothetical stories that carried more weight than Marvel's previous What If titles. Also, fun fact, when the Exiles were created in 2001, the story and the team were formulated from a period of development at Marvel in which the publisher was trying to create a new What If series. Anyway, Blink has always been one of the only constants on the team, one of the only remaining original members, and the team's leader, who initially wore the Talus device that allowed her to communicate with the Time Broker, prior to rebelling against him, that is. To this day, in the third series of Exiles, Blink has remained their leader, showing tactical prowess and smarts in navigating the reality-hopping troupe of heroes. And finally, in our number 1 spot, Teleportation Javelins. The Earth 295 version of Blink is a bit more advanced when it comes to her abilities than her 616 counterpart. She has learned how to manipulate her powers in other ways, including focusing her abilities into short, transparent, crystal-looking javelins, which she throws as projectiles, which teleport whoever or whatever they touch. As we mentioned earlier, they can also be beacons, so it can be a very tactical weapon too. Now, these are also called dimensional energy projection, which cause disruption by partial teleportation. She can use them to redirect incoming attacks, fire them back at her foes, and in addition to those, she can charge the javelins so that they cut through objects by teleporting said objects' matter elsewhere. They can stun opponents, cause her foes to go unconscious, and she generally keeps a couple of them in a quiver that she wears on her back. It's also worth noting that her physical appearance was something that was altered in the Exiles too. While still maintaining her lilac skin color, her eyes would get a bit of a makeover. Initially, in both the Age of Apocalypse timeline and the Ultimate Marvel Universe, she had white eyes with a blue sheen versus a green tint. The more you know, fun fact.